Jipmer, final year exam going student. They already gave their introduction. We will be discussing mainly bronchiectasis for lobectomy, bar pneumonectomy. Also, Dr. Raj will try to, tell you the questions, most commonly asked questions. If this bronchiectasis patient comes for non-thoracic surgery, also depending upon the time. And today's moderator will be Dr. Raj. Dr. Raj is a very popular teacher. He's a lecturer, a popular academician, and people will, his halls will be always full. Whenever we go to a conference, if it is a Raj talk, usually halls will be full. He's very slowly and neatly, like a UKG, LKG students, how you teach. In that way, he teaches. We are very fond of his lectures, and we are expecting to learn. As examiners, also we are expecting to learn from him, and it will be definitely helpful for all the students who are taking their final exams. Now we will hand over to Dr. Raj to start the session, and Dr. Nagalakshmi, kindly mute everybody, including me.
I'll
Okay,
mute
Raj.
everybody.
Hi, good evening all, especially the Nitin, Pooja and Tanuja. So I think I can start the case presentation. Tanuja, who's presenting?
Sir, 1 minute, sir.
Yeah.
Yeah, Nagalakshmi, tell me.
1 minute. I'll mute everybody and then hand over.
Okay, sure.
Hear me?
Yes, ma'am, I can hear you, ma'am.
Nitin can unmute.
Can you hear me, Tanuja?
Yes, sir, I can hear you, sir.
Okay, yeah.
Can I start, sir?
Yeah, sure.
My patient is a 40-year-old woman by name Mutammal, hailing from Villupuram. Occupation is agricultural laborer. She presented with complaints of cough with expectoration for the past 5 years and breathlessness on exertion for the past 2 years. Expectoration is insidious in onset. It is persistent and progressive. In the last 2 months, it's productive in nature, aggravated during early morning and left lateral position. It's not associated with chest pain. Sputum production is moderate in quantity, around 50 ml per day. It's whitish in color, thick consistency. It's not foul smelling, not blood stain, aggravated during morning and in the left lateral position. There's a history of hemoptysis on and off for past 5 years, 4 episodes in the last year. Frank blood of 50 to 100 ml each episode. It's not associated with sputum or food particles. There's history of breathlessness for past 2 years, which is insidious in onset, gradually progressive. Initially, she felt breathless while hurrying on the level ground. Now, she's not able to cope up pace with the same age group people. It's aggravated by cough, relieved with rest. It's not associated with breathlessness on lying down, or sleep is not disturbed due to breathlessness. There's no history of palpitations or syncope or swelling of legs. There's no history of decreased urine output, and there's no history of abdominal distension. There's no history of fever with evening rise of temperature, and there's no history of increased sweating during night. There's history of loss of weight and loss of appetite. There's no history of hoarseness of voice or dysphagia. Past history. There's a history of breathing difficulty with fever 5 years ago, which required hospitalization, but she not require placing tube in throat. There's no history of pulmonary TB or contact with tuberculosis. There's no history of diabetes mellitus or hypertension or seizure disorder or bronchial asthma. There's no history of previous surgeries in the past. Family history, she's married for 15 years and sterilization was done 10 years ago. no history of tuberculosis in anyone in the family. Personal history is she takes mixed diet. She is not a smoker, but the history of passive smoking for 15 years. Husband is a smoker. Medication history, she takes intermittent nebulization from local hospital. And 1 month ago, she had a fever with L sputum, which was treated with medications. And occupational history is she's an agricultural laborer, but she's not going for work for past 2 months. So summary of my history is she's a 40-year-old
Can you
woman.
summarize the positive findings and negative findings?
Yes, sir. She's a 40-year-old woman with complaints of cough with mucopurulent sputum production with occasional hemoptysis for past 5 years and modified medical research council of grade 2 dyspnea for past 2 years. And there is no history of orthopnea or PND, paroxysmal nocturnal dyspnea. And it is probably a case of suppurative lung disease involving right lung for further evaluation.
Okay. When you say suppurative lung disease, what are the suppurative lung diseases you know?
Sir, bronchiectasis, lung abscess, and necrotizing pneumonia. And
okay, so when you say bronchiectasis and lung abscess are common suppurative lung diseases. From the history which you have given so far, what do you think your patient has? Bronchiectasis or lung abscess?
Sir, from the history, I believe it is bronchiectasis, sir. That's because of there is no fever current. There's no active fever right now, and it is not purulent or foul-smelling sputum.
Bronchiectasis also can produce purulent and sputum. No? Copious amount of purulent sputum is one of the main characteristics. When you have a lung abscess, patient will be much more sicker. Okay, and compared to a bronchiectasis. Okay. Why can't it be? What is COPD by definition?
COPD is the expiratory airflow limitation, which is not reversible completely with the bronchodilators.
So this is a pathological definition. I am just asking, when you as a clinical definition of COPD, cough with sputum,
cough with expectoration and associated with dyspnea.
No, there is this thing. At least 3 months every year for 2 consecutive years, where chronic no other. So that's why that's a COPD definition you like to hear.
Yes, sir. It is chronic bronchitis is a persistent cough with expectoration for 3 months in a year and at least for 2 years. 2
consecutive years where no other cause of cough and expectoration is found. Like if it's a child, you may be having cough and expectorations 2 to 3 times a year for 2 years. So you won't call it as COPD. Right? So the clause is where no other cause of cough with productive sputum is found. Okay, so you talked about hematemesis. What are the causes of hematemesis you know?
Hemoptysis, sir.
Okay, hemoptysis, yeah.
Yes, causes of hemoptysis, respiratory causes include bronchiectasis, lung abscess, pulmonary TB, and the cardiac causes would be, and also bronchogenic carcinoma. And cardiac causes would be mitral stenosis, pulmonary edema, and pulmonary hypertension. And if the patient is on anticoagulants, then there's vascular disorders like Goodpasture syndrome and vaginous granulomatosis.
That's right. So how will you differentiate hemoptysis with hematemesis?
Yes, sir. Hemoptysis, it's preceded by cough. Hematemesis is preceded by nausea and vomiting. And hemoptysis could be frothy and associated with sputum. Hematemesis may be mixed with food particles. And hemoptysis of bright red in color. And hematemesis could be coffee ground in color associated with melena. And
very good. Okay. You said your patient has probable bronchiectasis. Bronchiectasis.
Bronchiectasis is a suppurative lung disease, which is which can it's Pathological diagnosis is dilatation of the bronchi of irreversible dilatation of the bronchi of more than 2 millimeters.
Which part of which bronchi?
Medium-sized bronchi.
Medium-sized bronchus. Okay. And you made one statement like there is no orthopnea in PND. So
Yes, sir.
what do you want to say here when you said that there is no orthopnea in PND?
I want to rule out if the breathlessness is associated with a cardiac cause, which is of left-sided heart failure to rule out.
Okay. Okay. So how do you differentiate between cardiac and respiratory dyspnea apart from orthopnea and PND?
Respiratory dyspnea may be associated with the cough with expectoration, as in my case, and cardiac cause could be associated with the other signs of right-sided failure like pedal edema and
will right-sided failure cause breathlessness more commonly or left-sided failure?
Left-sided failure is more
Okay.
commonly causing
Okay.
breathlessness.
So normally if you have a pulmonary cause, you will have associated fever, cough, the patient will have pleurisy type of chest pain and all those things. Okay.
Yes.
And we'll not go into the, how do you grade dyspnea? You said that's a modified.
Modified Medical Research Council of Dyspnea is used for respiratory diseases. Grade 0 is there's no breathlessness on exertion. Grade 1 is breathlessness on walking up a slight hill or hurrying on the level ground. And grade 2 dyspnea is she's not able to keep pace with the contemporaries or the same age group of people, or she has to stop for breath while walking at one pace after some distance. Grade 3 is she has to stop for breath after walking for few minutes or 100 meters
yards.
around. And 4 is breathlessness at rest.
Okay. So what is cor pulmonale?
Cor pulmonale is a right-sided heart failure that occurs due to respiratory cause because of rise in pulmonary vascular pressure.
Okay. So how important is to assess the effort tolerance before when you see him for a lung resection? Like this patient has come to pre-anesthesia clinic. How important is the assessment of effort tolerance?
Effort tolerance will help in knowing the severity of the disease, and will help us in the management of the disease intraoperatively, and to expect what all post-operative complications that can be expected.
Can you be a bit more specific? Like if somebody says I can climb only one flight, will you take him for a pneumonectomy or lobectomy? Or
sir, one flight of stairs corresponds to less than 12 ml per kg per minute of VO2 max, sir. So
no.
Even lesser than that, sir. Actually, 2 flights of stairs less than 12 ml per kg per minute.
Yeah. So somebody, that is the thing. So somebody who can climb 5, if you are looking at the stair climb as a criteria, if you are able to climb 5 flights of stairs, then you can take him for pneumonectomy, and 3 flights for lobectomy. So when it is less than that, you need to quantify it a bit more better the newly available techniques. Okay.
Okay, sir.
So what are the some of the effects of smoking?
Effects of the smoking: pulmonary and cardiac and immune function. And pulmonary would be there is impaired mucociliary clearance, and there is an increase in sputum production, and small airway narrowing would be happening. Then cardiac causes, because of the rise in nicotine, there is increased myocardial consumption because of chronotropy and inotropy. Increase in chronotropy and inotropy. Because of carbon monoxide increase in level, there would be impaired oxygen transport and also negative inotropy. And
so in carbon monoxide poisoning, what type of hypoxia will you have? That's fine. A Pooja or one of your friends can help you.
Hypoxia.
Why?
Carboxyhemoglobin higher affinity. Carbon monoxide has higher affinity towards hemoglobin. So
Nitin.
Yes,
Okay.
sir.
Somebody has helped you. Ravi Kiran has helped you by saying that it is anemic hypoxia. I will agree with Ravi Kiran because it got 200 times or 2000 times more affinity for hemoglobin.
And
yeah, so when you have so much higher affinity for hemoglobin, whatever hemoglobin you have will get um, attached to carbon monoxide. Okay, so you have very less hemoglobin available for oxygen transport. So it's like an anemic hypoxia. Okay.
Yes.
So continue, Tanuja. So what are the other effects of smoking?
There is a decreased immune function. So they are predisposed to the infection. And post-operative wound infection would be high.
How does it affect the mucociliary function?
It decreases the mucociliary clearance. Ciliary function will be depressed.
Okay, so I agree to this, but then if you advise somebody to stop smoking, I know in your particular case it's not there, but if you have a patient who is a smoker and you are advising him to stop smoking, what is the time frame will you advise?
Sir, ideally at least 4 to 8 weeks, 6 weeks patient should stop smoking for the improvement of the pulmonary function test and small airway expansion, sir.
Okay, so when you stop, but most of the time if you say 8 weeks, you cannot ask the patient with a lung malignancy to come after 2 months.
Yes,
okay, so realistically you cannot wait so long. So if you are waiting for a week, what are the changes which happens within 12 hours, 24 hours, 48 hours, 1 week?
12 to 24 hours, there is a decrease in level of nicotine and carbon monoxide. By 48 to 72 hours, carboxyhemoglobin levels normalizes. And by 5 to 8 days, there is ciliary function improves. And by 1 to 2 weeks, there is a decrease in sputum production. And 4 to 8 weeks, there is a 4 to 6 weeks, there is an improvement in the pulmonary function test. And by 6 to 8 weeks, there is an increase immune function and metabolism normalizes. By 8 to 12 weeks, there's decreased post-operative morbidity.
So in your particular patient, you said there was a episode of fever about 1 week back or 10 days back?
1 month ago, sir. There's
1 month ago. Okay. How is the recent evidence of infection or fever affect your management, your management?
Sir, there is if there is a infection, that should be completely cleared before taking up further case, sir. There should not be.
Okay, so you talked about sputum production. Now it is 50 ml per hour. What is a normal sputum production per day?
Less than 10 ml, sir. Less than 5.
No, what is a normal sputum production per day?
Less than 10 ml.
Sputum means like all of us produce sputum, no?
Yes,
or
sir.
Saliva is the same.
It's saliva.
Okay, no, what 100 to 150 ml per day will be the normal thing, but you are not spitting it out. Okay, so when you talk about cough with expectoration, what is an acceptable level in a bronchiectasis patient?
More than 100 ml is called as bronchuria, and actually before taking up for surgery, it should be less than 40 ml, sir. Before taking up for surgery, it should be less than 40 ml.
Yeah, correct. Sorry, I think my other statement also like sputum production normally will be, I agree with you, 10 to 15 ml per day. And for bronchiectasis, less than 40 ml per day is an acceptable thing. Okay.
Yes.
So when will you accept a patient with suppurative lung disease in terms of quantity of sputum we discussed, quality of sputum?
Quality of the sputum, it should, my patient has thickened secretion, sir, thickened consistency. It should not be, for that we need to optimize by loosening the secretion, sir.
So what this you may actually told it in the history. Your sputum production is 50 ml per day. It is non-foul smelling, and it is mucoid rather.
Mucoid.
It is whitish rather than purulent.
Yes.
Okay, and the patient is afebrile. So then that kind of patients we can accept for surgery. Okay, now do you want to proceed with the examination?
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Examination wise, patient is conscious oriented, moderately built and nourished. Her weight is 68 kg and height is 164 centimeter. BMI of 25.28. She is comfortable at rest. Heart
What
rate
is the height?
164 centimeters, sir.
Okay.
She is comfortable at rest. Heart rate of 68 per minute. Regular rhythm, normal volume and character. There is no radiofemoral delay. All peripheral pulses are equally felt. Blood pressure is 110/68 millimeter mercury in left upper limb sitting position. Respiratory rate is 16 per minute, thoraco-abdominal type, which is normal rhythm. There is no accessory muscle use. Temperature is 37 degrees. JVP is not elevated. She has mild pallor. There's no icterus, cyanosis.
How will you check JVP? I normally don't ask this question, but examiners will ask. How did you check for JVP?
Sir, JVP is checked by putting the patient in the semi-recumbent position, sir, and turning the patient's head on the opposite side, right side JVP is measured. And
how will you keep him in semi-recumbent position?
Around 45 degrees head
on
a
bed, which back can be elevated.
Yes, sir.
Okay, yeah.
Then we will point out the maximum impulse, and a scale is placed on the second intercostal manubrium sterni, and from there another scale parallelly placed towards the maximum impulse, and that will be the
okay, that is fine. Thank you. Continue.
Clubbing is a pan-digital clubbing of grade 2. There is no pedal edema, no lymphadenopathy. There are no external markers of tuberculosis. And airway is mouth opening of 5 centimeter. Modified Mallampati of grade 2. Upper lip bite test is +1. Neck movements, extension.
When you said modified Mallampati of grade 2, what are the structures you saw in modified Mallampati grade 2, and who modified it?
Young and Samson has modified the Mallampati scoring. And in grade 2, I can see the uvula, soft palate, and hard palate.
Okay, so I have a problem here, because when you're talking about Mallampati grading, you have to tell what Mallampati has described. If you look at the Samson and Young's classification, it says soft palate, uvula, and fauces. It doesn't tell that you can see hard palate. Hard palate you're seeing, but Samson and Young's classification doesn't say you can see hard palate. Okay. So Mallampati, when you describe, you tell what is described by Samson and Young. Okay, that's fine. No problems.
Okay. Then neck movements are extension and flexion of full range. Submandibular compliance is normal. Thyromental distance of 7 centimeter. Neck circumference is 33 centimeter. There is no loose tooth or buck tooth. And spine is midline, interspaces are fed. There's no deformity or tenderness. Systemic examination, upper respiratory tract, oral cavity, nasal cavity, and pharynx are normal. There are no nasal polyps. And
can you tell the positive findings?
Yes, sir. Positive findings on inspection is there's decrease on palpation, decreased expansion is seen on the right side, and on percussion, impaired note in the mammary, infraaxillary and infrascapular area. And
what do you mean by that statement? Impaired note on percussion. Is there fluid?
No, sir. When there is fluid, it will be dull note, sir.
So impaired note means?
Cavity impaired note can be there, sir. Thick walled cavity. Then on auscultation, there is a high-pitched tubular bronchial breath sounds in right mammary, infraaxillary and infrascapular areas, and coarse leathery crepitations in mid-inspiratory phase on the right side, and which are altered with coughing. And increased vocal resonance is increased in the mammary, infraaxillary and infrascapular areas.
So that's so from the history and examination, what do you think is the diagnosis or a differential diagnosis?
It's a case of suppurative lung disease involving the right lower lip, belonging to American Society of Anesthesiologists Physical Status Classification 3, with the differential diagnosis. My differential diagnosis are bronchiectasis and lung abscess.
Okay, so I'll probably take bronchitis as the possible cause because your patient is not acutely sick. Did you say that the patient is having pallor?
Yes, sir. Mild pallor is present.
So what could be the cause of pallor?
Patient has a history of hemoptysis, sir. That could
Okay.
be one reason, and also increase in sputum production causing decrease in protein and formation of.
Okay, that's fine. What do you mean by clubbing?
Clubbing is a selective bulbous enlargement of the distal portion of the digit due to increased subungual soft tissue. Clubbing is developed when there is illness for 2 to 3 weeks at least, and the grades of the clubbing would be grade 1 is increased fluctuation test or loss of Levy bone angle, and grade 2 clubbing is parrot-beak appearance, grade 3 is drumstick appearance, grade 4 is hypertrophic or osteopathic.
So now that you have made a history and examination, will you do any of those? You would have read about bedside PFTs.
Yes, sir.
Will you do any of those bedside PFTs? And if you are going to do one, I need to know the what do you derive from doing that bedside PFT? So
usually what we do is that a breath holding test, Zebra's breath holding test is done, sir.
Okay.
That is from here we can find the more than 25 seconds. If it is there, it's normal, it's acceptable, and 25 to
what I'm saying is like in real life exam there's a question. I don't want to waste time there because you need to read about all the bedside PFTs because some examiners would like to ask it. I don't want to waste time on that, but among them, will you do any particular test as a part of your patient's assessment?
This and another test that we do is peak expiratory flow rate.
Okay, peak expiratory flow rate.
Right.
What is the normal for a male and female?
It's for the male it is 400 to 700 liters per minute, and for female it is 300 to 500 liters per minute.
What does peak expiratory flow rate tell you?
If the peak expiratory flow rate is less than 200 liters per minute, then the lung mechanics is poor.
Okay, so it basically tells you about the ability of the patient to cough. Okay, so that is very important when you are dealing with a post thoracotomy patient, because the patient needs to cough and clear the secretions. Okay. We had actually discussed about the effort tolerance of the patient. Is there any tests which you can do to assess the cardiopulmonary reserve of the patient at bedside? I'll give you a clue: 6-minute walk test or shuttle walk test.
Yes, sir. 6-minute walk test I would like to do because it's more correlating with the VO2 max.
Okay.
6-minute walk test, the patient is asked to walk for the 6 minutes at the patient's pace, and it is VO2 max is calculated by number of the meters that patient has walked divided by 30.
So minimum distance covered should be?
At least 400 meters.
Okay. Yeah. So if you are able to cover 450 meters, VO2 max can be 15. Okay.
Yeah.
It's like 15. I agree. Correct. Somebody is saying 500 meters. I'll agree with Tanuja that it is 400 meters. What do you mean by shuttle walk test?
Shuttle walk test, 2 shuttles are placed at a distance
two
of
cones. 2 cones.
Yes, sir, 2 cones placed at a distance of 10 meters, and
Okay.
patient is asked to walk with increasing speed. So if it's less than 25 shuttles or less than 250 meters, then VO2 max is less than 12 ml per kg.
Okay. What do you mean by stair climb test?
Stair climbing test, patient is asked to walk, climb up the stairs. At the
Is there any
patient-
specification for the steps and the number of stairs and height of
Yes,
one
sir.
floor?
One flight of the stairs is 20 steps, and each step should be 6 feet height. Sir.
6 inches.
6 inches height.
Okay. And so one floor will be approximately 3.3 meters.
Okay.
Approximately. Okay. So how can you quantify the stair climb test?
If it's more than 5 flights of stairs, if patient can climb, it is 20 more than VO2 max is more than 20 ml per kg per minute. If
Okay.
less than 2 flights of stairs, less than 12 ml per kg per minute.
Okay. So basically, if you look at the latest recommendation, they say 22 meters. A patient can be accepted for pneumonectomy. That is okay. So have you seen? I know it's a because you're answering well. I'll just ask you one question. Have you heard about this? So far, we have been looking at the three-leg stool approach, no, for assessment of resectability.
Yes, sir.
How can you? Do you have a cardiopulmonary exercise test in your institute?
No, sir, it is not done.
Okay, then we'll come back to that at the end of the this thing. Okay? At the end of the lecture, we'll discuss that aspect.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
So you said if you have cardiopulmonary exercise testing, when will you accept and when will you not accept a patient, especially for pneumonectomy?
10 ml per kg per minute. Less than that, you will not accept, sir.
Okay, great. Okay, so if you have a patient like this, will you accept the patient for anesthesia, or will you want? Do you want to any more optimize any further?
Like which patient, sir?
Your patient. Your patient.
Sir, my patient, I would like to accept for anesthesia after want to decrease the sputum production and the consistency by airway hydration and systemic hydration. And bronchodilator therapy, I'll decide based on the pulmonary function test if it shows any obstructive disease. Otherwise, this patient is not a smoker, so may not require a bronchodilator therapy. And I'd like to do other optimization, like I would want to teach the patient about incentive spirometry and deep breathing exercises that could help in the post-operatively. And there is some role of postural drainage for this patient. Usually postural drainage.
So if it is a right lower lobe, how will you do the postural drainage?
Right lower lobe with superior segments can be drained by making the patient lie in prone position and keeping a pillow under the chest, and the anterior segments can be drained by keeping the patient supine and in the Trendelenburg position, and at least 8 inches lower it should be, and or more than 25 degrees. And if it's for the posterior segment, patient should lie prone and with the same table 18 inches of more than 25 degrees in the Trendelenburg position, and right lateral by keeping the patient right side up and the Trendelenburg position.
Okay, so how do you want to investigate this patient?
Sir, for this, I want to confirm the diagnosis by taking a chest X-ray and a HRCT scanning, and in that honeycomb appearance or
yeah, fine, yeah,
and sputum examination, culture and sensitivity, and for AFB I want to see, and followed by that.
Can I give you one suggestion?
Yes.
So normally most of the examiners like to hear from hemoglobin.
Yes, sir.
Because already you said there is pallor.
Yes.
The other one is acceptable. Like I would like to confirm by taking X-ray and HRCT, which the surgeon would have already taken. Okay, so you will probably start with hemoglobin because my patient is pallor.
Yes.
I just want to rule out infection because patient. I'll do a total count. Yeah. Then.
So I want to see the HB and also hematocrit. I want to see if any dehydration is there, and WBC count with the differential leukocyte count. If there's increase in the neutrophils, then bacterial infection, increase in the absolute eosinophil count, asthma or aspergillosis, and platelet count I want to know. and renal function test of blood urea, serum creatinine, and also I want to know serum potassium if the patient, especially if the patient is on salbutamol nebulization, and I want to know liver function test if there could be a raise in liver enzymes if the patient has right-sided heart failure with congestive hepatomegaly, or if the patient is on antitubercular treatment. And also I want to know total protein albumin since the patient has copious sputum production, and I want to check ECG also to rule out right atrial or right ventricular hypertrophy. By right atrial
So
hypertrophy,
ECG, what are we going to see?
if there is right atrial hypertrophy, P pulmonale, that is
Okay.
increased tall peaked P waves of
Okay.
more than 3 small squares, and right ventricular hypertrophy, R and S ratio almost equals to 1 in V1 and V2. And echocardiogram, I want to see right ventricular hypertrophy and also pulmonary arterial hypertension.
Echo. So do you routinely ask for echo?
If the ECG changes are there, and if the patient is having any intermediate predictors like mild angina and
Unexplained effort dyspnea.
effort tolerance,
Yeah, then you can ask for echo, but normally we don't ask for echo in all cases. So you said you would look for pulmonary hypertension in echo.
Yes,
What
sir.
parameter will you look at?
Here, RVSP, I want to know, sir. Right ventricular
RVSP?
systolic pressure. Yes, sir. More than
Okay.
35, and if it is there, then could be pulmonary hypertension, sir.
Okay.
And
So in the
yeah.
So sometimes they don't like the write the RVSP. So in that case, you need to get the TR max pressure gradient, tricuspid regurgitation max pressure gradient plus RA pressure CVP, which is approximately 10. That is how they calculate the RVSP. Okay. So you want to see the PFT of this patient, and anything else you want to do?
And no, sir, the 3-legged.
You are going to do the PFT.
Yes, sir.
In the investigation, are you going to look at the blood grouping or something? Because your patient is already anemic.
Yes, sir. Cross match.
Yeah, anemic, and when you have a lung surgery, major lung surgery, it's better to arrange, because sometimes you can even have a pneumonectomy also if you have unexpected complications. So it's better to arrange a group a blood and keep it. Okay, especially if your patient is anemic.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so I'll just try to share my screen and show you one PFT. Okay, 1 second, I'll just share my screen. Okay. So if we see that this is the PFT.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Can you see it?
Yes, sir. I can see FE1 of
FEV1 of 2.39 liters was the predicted, but the actual is only 1.45.
Yes, sir. Percentage of the predicted is
60.7.
Yes, sir.
Okay. And will you look at that particular value, or will you look at the post bronchodilator value?
Like to look at the post bronchodilator value, sir.
Yeah, we should always look at the post bronchodilator value. Okay. Yes. And what else will you look into this if it's available? It's not there. There is one more thing you need to look at if there is a problem with FEV1. DLCO also we should see.
Yes, sir. Okay.
Because if you look at the 3-leg stool approach, one aspect is looking at the respiratory mechanics, and the one is parenchymal function. Okay. So if you say that pre-op FEV1 is 1.45 liter, will you accept him for lobectomy?
Yes, sir. More than 1 liter, we can accept, sir.
Pneumonectomy?
So I would Like to calculate the post-operative predicted FE1, sir.
Okay. The question which I want to ask you here is, if you look at the previous guidelines, it was looking at absolute values. So it said mortality of pneumonectomy or lung resection is less than 5% if the pre-op FEV1 is more than 2 liter for pneumonectomy and more than 1.5 liter for lobectomy. Okay. So will you look at the absolute number or will you look at the percentage predicted?
I want to look at the percentage predicted, sir, because it is different based on the age, sex, and height.
Okay, very good. So we should not look at the absolute numbers. One, because as you said, it is dependent on age, sex, and race. And second, all the studies have shown that percentage predicted value have more correlation with post-op outcomes.
Yes, sir.
Okay. So if you have a patient with this particular value, 63%, and if this is the patient's chest X-ray, are you all seeing that marking on the paper? Are you see? Okay. Somebody has drawn a lot of rounds and this thing. Okay. So are you able to see this X-ray?
Sir, can I interrupt? Raj sir,
Yeah.
can I interrupt?
Yeah.
Sir, there, if there is something on your screen, you can stop other people scribbling on the screen. Something on the right top. No, in the Zoom thing.
Yeah, I'm trying to see.
There will be something called more, some option called more.
Okay, more.
You drop
Disabled
it down.
Participant. Yeah, more disabled participants annotation.
Yeah.
Okay.
That you can do, sir.
Okay. Already people have annotated too much.
Sorry about it. I should have told it at the start. I'm sorry.
Okay, no problems. I thought somebody was taking revenge. Okay.
They are trying to ask something probably. Okay, you continue, sir, please.
Okay, so Tanuja, if you have an X-ray like this,
Yes,
then how will you calculate the? You know the FEV1 now, 60% of predicted.
Yes, sir. So post-operative predicted FE1 equals to preoperative FE1 percentage into 1 minus number of percentage of functional segments going to be removed by 100.
Okay, so can you tell me what is the in this particular case? Can you see approximate amount of functional segments?
Yes, sir. In this, it is 12 by 42, sir. Lower lobe.
Okay, so do you think that 12, this is a bit of controversial thing. I know for an MD exam, you do like this because most of the examiners also do it like this. 42 minus only 12. Okay.
Yes.
42 minus 12 divided by 42, into 60. That's what we are going to do, no?
Yes, sir. Into 100.
Okay.
Into 60, sir.
Okay, but I'll tell you, this is not for the exam, but in real life, what you need to understand is that these 12 segments, if you look at here, it's already destroyed and gone. So yes, the total number of functional segments in when you practice as a consultant tomorrow is not 42, it is only 30.
Okay, sir.
Okay, and what you are going to remove is, like if the surgeon is posted for lobectomy, lower lobectomy only, you are not going to remove any functional segments, but most of the time this will end up as lower plus middle lobectomy. So you are only taking out that 4 segments which are functional. Okay, so in the exam, if most of the examiners will probably accept that answer, which you already said, only 12 segments are going to be removed. 42 minus 12 divided by 42 into 100. Is it clear?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So the reason I am asking is, I'll give you another scenario. Give me a second. Just give me 1 second. Okay, so if you can just give me 1 minute, I'll just show you that.
That's it.
Yeah, sorry. Sorry.
There? No, no,
Can
no.
you hear?
You can. We can hear you. You
Yeah.
can actually stop screen sharing and then come in again, so that these markings will go off.
Okay, sure.
Now you can screen share and you can do the stopping the annotations from outside.
Okay. Yeah, sure. Okay, so Tanuja, sorry, I'm taking it to the one next level. So sometimes you get a, oh, somebody has managed to do it. Okay, so if you get a picture like this, okay,
Yes,
if it's another patient where you have got a significant amount of post TB bronchiectasis and the lung is on this side is totally destroyed and the right lung has compensated hyperinflated. And
Yes.
if this particular patient's pre-op FEV1 is 55%.
Yes, sir.
How will you calculate the predicted post-op FEV1? So here the patient is going to have a pneumonectomy, left-sided pneumonectomy.
Yes, sir.
So use the same formula and tell me.
Sir, ideally it's the preoperative FE1 into 1 minus percentage of the functional lung segments removed by 100.
Okay, so
but
how much is that?
Here it's the left-sided one, so total 20 segments are being removed, so 20
Okay.
by 42.
Okay. So it's almost 50%, no?
Yes,
20 by 40.
yes, sir.
Okay, and it divided by 55. So if you calculate the predicted post-op FEV1 will be like 28.828%.
Yes.
So will you accept her for a pneumonectomy?
Sir, if it's less than 30%, less than 20%, we will not accept it all. Less than 30% with no other comorbidities, a patient may require post-operative mechanical ventilation with staged weaning, so we can accept.
Okay, so here I want to tell everyone one thing. This is a very common thing which will happen in a lot of our patients, Indian patients. So if you look at this classical three-legged stool approach, it was originally designed for malignancy. Okay, so if you have a malignancy, either in the right side upper lobe, left upper lobe or left lower lobe, and then there is a reason why you're going to do a left pneumonectomy, then you're going to take out a huge amount of functional lung. If you look at this particular picture, you can see that this lung is totally destroyed and gone. Okay, and this lung has right lung has done a compensatory hyperinflation. Somebody has actually scribbled it here, P by Q. So it's probably an indication to do a ventilation perfusion scan or a perfusion scan. So here, when you do a perfusion, if at all you do a perfusion scan, you will realize that almost 80% or 85% of the blood is right side. You understand? So predicted post-op FEV1 will be easily more than 55 into 80, like 44 percentage. What I'm trying to tell you here is that one line percent amount of functional lung tissue removed. In a situation like this, what you need to understand is there is hardly any functional lung tissue removed. Most of the lung on this side, which is going to be removed, is an infected and already destroyed lung. Okay, so that the that is again for your practical life lesson. This thing is used to the three-legged stool approach was designed to calculate for malignancy, okay, not for infection. Okay, is that clear, Tanuja?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Okay, so we'll stop sharing the screen and we'll make her answer then. Does Pooja wants to give Tanuja a break? Okay. What are the chest X-ray findings of bronchiectasis?
Sir, when we form of cases in whole lungs, and they can be happen outside if large
I think a lot of disturbance in your. Can Tanuja answer then?
Yes, sir. On the chest X-ray, ring opacities or tram track opacities or gloved finger can be seen, sir.
Okay. So when you look at the chest X-ray, you divide the lung into 3 zones. So you need to see dilated bronchi. You don't normally see the dilated bronchi beyond the 2/3. So you should be able to see the dilated bronchi beyond the 2/3 of the lung fields. Hello?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And how do you know from chest X-ray whether the patient has got pulmonary hypertension?
There is increased bronchovascular markings.
Sure. I thought there will be pulmonary pruning. Once you establish pulmonary hypertension, there will be pulmonary pruning. Then? Okay. Hello?
Yes, sir.
Somebody has written pulmonary pruning, evidence of right ventricular hypertrophy. There is increased diameter of the endon views of pulmonary artery at the hilum. Okay, so will you do an ABG for this patient? You didn't mention about ABG. Do you routinely do ABG at your center? And if you do an ABG, what is the importance? And when do you start worrying about ABG findings?
ABG is we usually do ABG for the patients, sir. When ABG in that PaO2 and PaCO2, when it is less than PaO2 is 60 and PaCO2 is more than 45, then impaired gas exchange is there, sir.
Okay, so you talked about three-legged stool approach, no?
Yes, sir.
So can you explain a bit about three-legged stool approach?
So three-legged stool approach consists of lung mechanics and parenchymal to evaluate the lung mechanics, to evaluate the parenchymal function and cardiopulmonary interactions. To evaluate the lung mechanics, pulmonary function test is done, sir. In that FE1, FE1 by FEC, FEC is seen.
FE1 by FEC is not used here. FE1 by FEC is mainly used to see whether it's restrictive or obstructive.
Yeah. Restrictive. Then for the parenchymal function, diffusion lung capacity for carbon monoxide and ABG is done, sir. And for cardiopulmonary interactions, it's usually the cardiopulmonary excess testing is expensive and time taking. So we do a bedside test of 6-minute walk test or stair climbing test, sir. And also it's based on the like we may not do all 3. It's based on the each function, sir. First, if the functional capacity of more than 2 metabolic equivalents, then we will do either of the pulmonary function test or DLCO. If either of it is more than 60%, then we can take up for surgery. If it is of 60 to 30%, then
Are you talking about predicted post-op values or absolute values?
absolute.
Okay.
Sorry, sir. Predicted post-operative values, sir.
If you're talking about predicted post-op values, we should talk about 40% and above.
So it's
Absolute value, I agree with you.
absolute value, sir.
See, more than 60%. Predicted post-op value should be more than 40%.
40%. Sorry, these are absolute values, sir.
Okay. So, do you see a lot of correlation between FEV1 and DLCO, or if you have to, which one is more reliable?
So DLCO, in case of if the patient has diffuse pulmonary fibrosis or preoperative chemotherapy if patient has received, then DLCO will be impaired, but whereas pulmonary function test will be normal, sir.
All the studies have shown that the DLCO correlates much better with post-op morbidity, even compared to predicted post-op FEV1. Okay. It has got a much more stronger predictive capacity than FEV1. Okay. So we talked about this VQ scan, role of VQ scan. What we talked about first was segment counting, this 42 out of 20 and all are segment counting. That is ideally should be used for lobectomy, and for pneumonectomy, ideally you should be using a perfusion scan. But in real life, many a times it's not possible because of the cost. Okay. Okay. So if you have the facility, what are the indications for cardiopulmonary exercise test? When will you ask? What are the indications?
Sir, when the PFT or the FE1 or the DLCO is less than 30%, or when the 6-minute walk
predicted
test
post-op FE1 or predicted post-op DLCO, both are less than 30%. Yes.
And 6-minute walk test of less than 400 meters.
Okay. Yeah.
These two.
Okay. Or is somebody with a high risk cardiac evaluation also, you should ask for CPET. Okay.
Yes, sir.
So you have done the PFT, you have done exercise test and all those things. And how will you plan? Like the patient will need to know what is a post-operative plan. Will I be ventilated or will I be extubated?
Yes.
How do you decide on it? Yeah.
If the post-operative predicted FE1 is more than 40%, then patient can be extubated on table, and then if it's 40
provided the patient is
warm and alert and hemodynamically stable.
Yeah.
And if it is 40 to 30%, then it depends on the other comorbidities or exercise tolerance, these things. And if it is less than 30%, patient will require a staged weaning. And there are if it's thoracic epidural is placed, then extubation can be done early.
Okay. So you're going to, will you do a thoracic epidural if you're going to have this patient?
Yes, sir. I would like to place a thoracic epidural.
Okay. So especially when you are having an infection, sometimes the surgeons are a bit concerned. So you need to discuss with them about the option of thoracic epidural. So if you're going to put a thoracic epidural, what level will you put the epidural?
T5 to T6 level I would like to place, sir, because T4 to T6 will be the incision, and T7 to T8 will be the intercostal drain placement. I would like to cover both of it, sir, by placing at T5 to T6 level.
Okay. So will you put a midline approach or a paramedian approach?
Midline approach, sir. I would like to choose, sir.
Okay. Why do you prefer to choose a midline? Okay, that's fine. So how will you initiate the epidural?
After placing the thoracic epidural and after giving the test dose, I'd like to give 0.25% of bupivacaine, sir, and local anesthetics is my choice. First, a bolus of 5 to 5 ml, and followed by infusion of 5 ml.
So what are the other options? Like if I am the patient, I would like to know what are the other options of post-op analgesia.
Other options are intercostal nerve block, paravertebral block, and erector spinae block, serratus and anterior plane block, and opioids, systemic analgesia with opioids and NSAIDs. And
So you prefer to, you can say that you will use a multimodal analgesia with a combination of local in either of these forms, paracetamol and yeah, if needed, rescue analgesia. Okay, so okay, so you have discussed that with the patient. How will you plan for the pre-op advice, final pre-op advice and pre-medication?
Preoperative advice, I'd take consent from the patient and explain about the post-operative complications that can happen. And regarding the pre-medications, I'd like to, if the patient is taking any bronchodilators, I'd like to continue those bronchodilators. And on the day before surgery, I'd give tablet famotidine of 20 mg. On the day of surgery, I would give an aspiration prophylaxis of tablet famotidine of 20 mg, tablet metoclopramide of 10 mg, and I would like to give a short-acting benzodiazepines for anxiolysis.
Which benzodiazepine?
Midazolam, sir. On the
Midazolam. Well,
sir, if midazolam is a short-acting benzodiazepine, I would like to give it in the pre-op holding area, sir.
Okay, what dose?
0.05, 0.025 mg per kg, sir, around at 1 to 2 mg.
Route?
Route is IV, sir.
0.02. Okay, so you are not going to give an oral pre-medication. Only after you come, patient comes to the holding area, you will put an IV access and then give the midazolam.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Okay, so how will you prepare your theatre, and what else will you do in the final pre-op check?
Yes, sir. So preparation, OT preparation would be to machine check and resuscitation equipment and general anesthesia drugs with appropriate dilution. And I would like to keep the
can I just make one statement here? When you say general anesthesia with appropriate dilution, it's not a great statement. Actually tell what all drugs you are going to use for induction. And yeah.
So for the induction, I'd like to use fentanyl of 2 microgram per kg and propofol titrated doses. And
okay.
I'd like to do a rapid sequence induction with succinylcholine of 1.5 mg per kg and followed by long-acting muscle relaxants, and then emergency drugs like atropine and mephentermine and
okay, that's fine.
And
what else will you keep?
And I'd like to keep a double lumen tube of size 39 okay. French and 37 French. And
okay, so you have got a female patient.
Yes, sir.
How do you decide on the size of the double lumen tube?
Sir, more than 160 centimeters female, it is 39 French. Sir. Less than 160 centimeters.
Which reference is this?
Sir, Meller, based on the height.
If you look at the what is it given in Miller, it is written more than 160 centimeter female, 37 French helping you. Okay, 37 French, and if it is less than 160, it is 35 French. And if the if your patient's height is
164, sir.
164. So, but a lot of our Indian girls are less than 150 also, 5 foot. 4'9", 5 foot. So if something that person's height is 148 centimeter, how will you decide on the size?
32 French we can based on the height.
No, answer is correct, but it is not only the height
Tracheal
even
diameter, I would like to see if it's.
okay.
CT
Where do you look at the tracheal diameter? Tracheal diameter is measured at the level of tracheal inlet, that is at the level of clavicle. Okay. Whatever you get, you measure it with 0.68. That gives you left main bronchus diameter. So this was described early by Brodsky, but what is happening now is most of our patients have got a CT scan. Okay, so even this is in the Miller also. So Hanella has come out with left main bronchus diameter 2 cuts below the carina. Okay, so if in a patient who is less than 152 centimeter, if the left main bronchus diameter is less than 10, then you can go for 32, and if it is 10 and above, you can go for 35. So especially in bronchiectasis, you should look at the left main bronchus diameter also to decide. Is that correct?
Yes.
Is that okay?
Yes.
Okay. So important to have a look at the X-ray and CT scan as an anesthetist to see. Sometimes you can see that there is distortion of the tracheobronchial tree. So then you should expect that, okay, if I put a double lumen tube, it may go to the opposite side. Okay.
Yes.
So it is important for all of us to look at the imaging ourselves.
Yes, sir.
Okay. So when you have a patient, you remember the PFT?
Yes, sir. 63%.
63%. So one of the things which we need to anticipate is in the final pre-op assessment is to assess the risk of hypoxia during one lung ventilation.
Yes, sir.
So how will you assess the risk of hypoxia? What are the patients who are at risk of hypoxia?
If the preoperative PFTs are normal and VQ scanning or is good on the affected side, and supine position, one lung ventilation, and lateral position, 2 lung ventilation of less PaO2, and right-sided lobectomy.
Okay, so correct, very good. So if you have got a right-sided thoracotomy, if somebody has got a normal pre-op FEU event, so why do someone with a normal pre-op FEU event give you problems?
Because the percentage of the functional lung segments which are going to be removed will be more set. The segments which are going to be removed are going to be
even before they are removed. What will happen is when they like for example, you're going to do a right-sided thoracotomy for a esophagus. Sometimes you get significant desaturation. Why? Because when you have a destroyed lung, there is hypoxic pulmonary vasoconstriction and has already set in, and most of the blood is actually going to the other lung. Okay, but when a normal lung is collapsed, there will be significant amount of blood which is still going to that lung because that lung is absolutely normal. Okay, that is the reason. Very good, but you answered well. So you said you want to use a double lumen tube. Why did you choose to use a double lumen tube and not a bronchial blocker?
Sir, here I would like to isolate the lung to avoid the cross contamination, and also in the double lumen tube the diameter is more, so suctioning and if at all fibrotic bronchoscopy to be performed, it can be performed, and once in case any problem happens, once the if bronchial blocker is placed, once it is deflated to achieve the 2 lung ventilation, and it is cross contamination is lost, this prevention of cross contamination is lost, and CPAP can be added.
Okay, I would like to modify that answer a bit. The reason why you want to use a double lumen tube is it's an absolute indication. Okay, bronchiectasis is an absolute indication for one lung ventilation. So what are the other absolute indication?
Infection, bronchiectasis, and lung abscess, and differential lung ventilation in case of broncho.
So one is to prevent contamination.
Yes, sir.
So that will be the lung abscess, bronchiectasis,
massive
hemorrhage, and when somebody is going to do a bronchopulmonary lavage. Okay, So the next is to for facilitation of ventilation. Like there will be example fistula.
Bronchopleuroputaneous fistula and large unilateral cyst or bulla.
Okay. And the third one is for surgical dressing, that is VATS. Okay. So this particular thing is an absolute indication because you want to prevent contamination of the opposite lung. That is one. The second thing what you said is suction, because it's a bronchiectasis, you are expecting copious amount of pus to pour down. Okay. So it may be easier to do tracheobronchial toileting. Another important thing is where the chance of dislodgement, okay, of a double lumen tube is much less compared to a bronchial blocker. So that is probably the reason why I want to use a double lumen tube. Okay. Have you used a bronchial blocker?
I have not used bronchial blocker.
Okay, but theoretically, what are the advantages of a bronchial blocker and the disadvantage of a bronchial blocker?
Advantages will be in case of difficult airways placing,
okay.
And also size availability, sir. And the DLT size is only till 26 French it's available.
Okay, very
for
good.
Pediatric cases, it will be useful. And also if we want a selective lobar collapse,
okay.
Fiber optic. And bronchial blocker is used. A disadvantage of bronchial blocker is this suctioning and fiber optic bronchoscopy to be performed. That will be defective, and
it offers slow collapse of the lung. More chance of dislodgement.
Whatever the
yeah. So you talked about fiber optic, but you didn't tell that I will ask my technician to arrange a fiber optic in the theater. So you're going to put a 35 DLT. What size bronchoscope will you keep? Fiber optic bronchoscope will you keep?
Sir, 3.5 to around 4.5 millimeters can be used for all sizes, sir.
I differ. Okay, so the thing is, 3.5 will comfortably go through a 37, 39, and 41. But if you're looking at 35 and 32, practically speaking, you need a 2.8 scope. Because otherwise, you will damage this fiber optic bronchoscope. Okay. 39, 41, I agree 4.5 will go. But practically speaking, 35, 37, I will put a 3.5 scope. And what are the things prerequisite before you do the dressing? You need to, if you don't have an experienced technician. So what are the other important things will you do to the fiber optic to keep it ready?
For fiber optic bronchoscope, I would connect with the light source and focus it and check if the tip movement is fine, and would like to read anything.
Yeah, do the white balance, and it's very extremely important to look at the orientation. There is a orientation marker which is like a wedge that should be at the 12 o'clock position.
Yes,
okay, because then only you will see right as right and left as left.
Yes,
okay. So will you use a right-sided DLT or a left-sided DLT?
For this patient, I want to use a left-sided double lumen tube, sir, because the surgery is on the right side, and otherwise also, unless there is a specific contraindications to the left-sided DLT, I would like to use a left-sided DLT even for the surgeries on the left side, sir.
So can you tell me some specific indications of a right-sided DLT?
Left-sided
right-sided DLT.
Right-sided DLT, if there is left bronchus involvement and left bronchogenic left bronchus tumor, or the left sleeve pneumonectomy if they're going to do, or if there is left bronchus disruption during surgery, if it's anticipated, I'd like to choose a right-sided.
Okay, so if you have a tumor compressing the left main bronchus from outside,
Yes,
or
sir.
for that may be a tumor or a descending aortic aneurysm. It can be an intraluminal tumor, or if the pulmonologist have stented it, the things which are inside. So you cannot put what do you call a double lumen tube into the left side. Left-sided pneumonectomy use it, and left lung transplantation and left-sided tracheobronchial redisruption. Okay, so if why do most, not only you, almost all the people prefer, there is something called margin of safety.
Okay. Yes, sir.
So can you explain the concept of margin of safety?
It is the length of the tracheobronchial tree over which double lumen tube can be manipulated without obstructing the airway, sir.
Okay. So what is the most proximal acceptable position for a left DLT?
It is just
if you see the bronchial cuff, just distal to the carina is the most proximal acceptable position.
Yes,
most distal acceptable position for a left DLT?
The left main bronchus length is around 5 centimeters, sir. So
okay.
We should keep above that.
Okay, so the most distal acceptable position should be like the tip of the double lumen tube should not enter the left lower lobe. Okay, so if you're doing a fiber optic, you should be seeing the left-sided secondary carina. Okay, there is a most distal acceptable position. Okay. Okay, so how will you monitor and how will you do induction of anesthesia? Is 60 kilos, no?
Yes, sir, 64 kg.
You are told, what will you monitor? Induction you have talked about already.
Yes, sir. Monitoring is, I would like to monitor invasive blood pressure, and I would like to monitor oxygenation and ventilation, oxygenation by saturation, and ventilation by end-tidal carbon dioxide, and ECG and
temperature.
Temperature, yes, sir.
Will you catheterize?
Sir, yes, sir. I would like to catheterize the patient, sir. And urine output.
Okay, so that is urine output. Okay. Will you use a normal blade, a Macintosh blade, or a video laryngoscope?
Sir, since there are no difficult predictors of the difficult airway, I would like to use a normal laryngoscope, sir.
Okay, I will accept that answer, because even though video laryngoscope has found to make intubation easier in a normal tube, okay, as far as where double lumen tubes are concerned, video laryngoscope have not found to have advantage. It will improve the visualization of the vocal cord, but time taken to intubation may not be much different. Okay.
Yes.
So what else will you monitor? Will you put a CVP or?
So since it's a lobectomy, and I would not prefer to put a central venous line, sir. Only two wide bore cannulas I would like to take, sir.
Okay. So suppose the surgeon says that it's a slightly more destroyed lung, or if it is a pneumonectomy, like the second picture which we have discussed, will you put a line?
Yes, sir. Central venous line. In a case of pneumonectomy, I would like to put a central venous line, sir.
Okay. Okay. So can you describe a typical double lumen tube? Left-sided double lumen tube.
I did not get the question, sir.
Can you describe a typical double lumen tube? It is two tubes attached together. How many curves it has got?
It has got two curves, sir, tracheal and bronchial, and it has two tubes placed parallelly, and it is
two cuffs.
Yes, sir. Tracheal, yes, sir. Two cuffs of 5 to 10 centimeter of volume of the tracheal cuff, 1 to 2 centimeter of volume of bronchial cuff, sir. And the tip is when we to know the side of the tube, we have to hold tracheal cuff concavity facing, and to whichever the side the tip of the bronchial tip is deviated, that is the side of the.
There is another way of differentiating. If you look at the left-sided double lumen tube, cuff is spherical, while with the Mallinckrodt type of donut shape.
Yes.
So can you describe the insertion of a double lumen tube?
Yes, sir. Insertion with the direct laryngoscopy. First, I would like to do. and like to um, will place the
We introduce it with the bronchial curve
Still
facing concave anteriorly.
concrete. Yes, sir. Stillet placed, I would pass the tube under vision through the vocal cords. Once it has passed the vocal cords of the bronchial tip, then I would rotate to the 90 degrees to the desired side of placement, to the left side here, and I would pass it till resistance is felt, or by the calculated formula of 12 plus patient height by 10, till that much centimeters I would like to pass inside. Sir. Then I will inflate the tracheal cuff and ensure the EtCO2 tracing, and followed by that I would like to check with the fiber optic bronchoscopy.
How will you clinically confirm?
Clinically, on inflating the tracheal cuff, there's auscultation of the bilateral breath sounds, chest movement, and on auscultation bilateral breath sounds, and EtCO2, end-tidal carbon dioxide.
Okay, agreed.
Yes.
After that,
I would like to confirm which side it is placed by using a fiber optic bronchoscopy.
No. Clinically, you don't have your fiber optic is damaged. How will you confirm it clinically?
Clinically, first step is inflating the tracheal cuff and bilateral breath sounds, and followed by that inflating the bronchial cuff and clamp the tracheal lumen, and there is a breath sounds on the left side, and there are no breath sounds on the right side. And on
you need to clamp the tracheal lumen and
yes,
open it to the atmosphere.
Yes, sir. Okay. Then on the taking of the clamp, reappearance of the breath sounds on both the sides, and on next step is that clamping the bronchial lumen. In that, right-sided breath sounds should be present, and left-sided breath sounds should disappear.
Okay. So you said you'll do fiber optic. When you do fiber optic, how do you look for? How do you say that it's in correct position?
Sir, first when fiber optic bronchoscopy is placed, anterior and posterior of the trachea, first we will differentiate. Anterior will have a tracheal rings, and posterior will be membranous. And
trachealis muscle. Trachealis muscle. Yeah.
Based on that, I will know which side on the it will be oriented.
Which lumen are you going to go through first? You're going to go through tracheal lumen or bronchial lumen?
Bronchial lumen, sir.
So when you go through bronchial lumen, what do you see? Okay. So first you should go through the tracheal lumen. Okay. So that's what you did for the other thing also, no? Clinical confirmation also.
Yes,
when you go through the tracheal lumen, what you should see is what you described. You should start seeing the tracheal rings anteriorly, trachealis muscle posteriorly as soon as you come out. Then what you see is the primary carina, which is sharp and sharp. And you should see the tube entering the left side, because you have put a left-sided DLT. And you should be able to see the blue curve just distal to the carina.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Anyway, when I send you the document, you guys what do you call write-up, the picture will be there. Okay. There will be a blue curve just distal to the carina. On the left side is the what you need to see. But if you are smart enough, you can actually go to the right side and look at the right upper lobe. Okay. So that is the only lobe which has got a trifurcation. Three things you will see. Okay. And then you close the right side and ventilate the right side and go through the bronchial lumen. Okay. When you go through the bronchial lumen, you should be able to see the left-sided secondary carina.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
So that is the thing what you do. Okay. So you realize that the double lumen tube has gone to the right side.
Yes, sir.
By mistake. So what do you do practically to get it to the left side?
Sir, under fiber optic guidance, we can take out the tube and turn to the opposite side, and under the vision we can manipulate to the left side, sir.
Okay, that is one. But there sometimes if you what people say is you pass it through the bronchial lumen and then railroad. But when you railroad, there is a chance that you may damage the fiber optic. So the other option, if you don't have a fiber optic, what do you do? If you don't have a fiber optic, after the bronchial cuff passes the vocal cord, you turn the head completely to the opposite side, that is right side, and introduce it. That is what we used to do earlier, before the fiber optic. Okay. So you have put a left-sided double lumen tube. So what are the malpositions you expect clinically? For example,
tube is too up or tube is too inside, or on the right side it has gone.
Okay.
These are the three malpositions.
Can you? I'll give you a scenario. You have started ventilation with the two-lung ventilation with 6 ml per kg tidal volume, like 16 to 6, 350 ml. You have put 350 ml. Airway pressures were like 24, 25. Okay.
Yes, sir.
The moment you started ventilating the left side, airway pressures have become 41 with volume control ventilation. So what do you think is the malposition?
The tube has gone too much into the left side, sir.
Okay.
So I'd like to, usually when the tube goes too much into the left side, on clamping the tracheal lumen, there will be the breath sounds on the left side. On clamping the bronchial lumen, there will not be breath sounds, and the bronchial cuff is inflated. There will not be breath sounds on bilaterally, sir.
Okay, so what do you do?
So we'll take out, we'll deflate the tracheal and bronchial cuffs, and then we'll withdraw it till and we'll withdraw 1 centimeter by
this thing and see this. See, sometimes what happens is the airway pressure becomes okay. Okay, then when you confirm it, that is one option. Other option is when you check with a fiber optic, you can withdraw it under vision and sort out. Okay. So one more malposition I would like to give you. That you have started the case with this lady. Suddenly you realize that you are not able to ventilate. EtCO2 has disappeared. Airway pressures are very high. What has happened? This is something which can be which can happen very commonly, and when it happens, it's scary, especially in a short, small Indian lady. Suddenly, the surgeon has position, he is doing the surgery. Suddenly, he is not complaining of anything.
Herniation of the bronchial cuff would have happened.
That is one option. Another option is tube slipping out. Okay, that is tubes slipping outside. And if the bronchial cuff is overinflated, okay, sometimes. Okay, in this particular scenario, it will be a different thing. But if you're doing, okay, sorry, that one I will describe later. Okay, I will consider it only as herniation. Okay.
Yes, sir.
Okay. So what are your ventilation goals?
Sir, ventilation parameters would be tidal volume of 5 to 6 ml per kg, and keeping the plateau pressure of less than 25 centimeter water, and P max of less than 35 centimeter water, and respiratory rate of around 12 per minute, keeping the EtCO2 of 35 to 40, and then FiO2 of 50 to 80% may require, and inspiratory to expiratory ratio of normal ratio of 1:2 I'd like to keep in this patient.
What about PEEP?
PEEP of 5 to starting with 5 centimeter water I'd like to.
Okay. What are the problems of giving too much of PEEP?
Sir, too much of the PEEP increases the blood flow to the operative lungs, sir. That causes.
Okay. So if you do a ABG after about half an hour, okay. What can and if you even if you're using 100% PO2, 100% oxygen, what are the PO2 you're likely to get?
Of 150, sir. Usually PF ratio of 150 will be.
Okay, very good. So why do you get that 150 PF?
Because of the increase in the shunt that happens, sir.
Okay, can you explain?
Yes, sir. Usually in the lateral position, there will be a perfusion of the dependent lung is the 60%, and perfusion of the non-dependent lung is 40%. But on achieving the one lung ventilation, the perfusion on the ventilated lung is around 72.5%. There would be a shunt of 27.5%. Normally, shunt will
Okay,
be less than 10%.
why does that happen?
Because of the hypoxic pulmonary vasoconstriction, sir. Ideally, the
Okay.
shunt will be 40%, but 50% decrease in the shunt happens.
Okay, correct.
So the shunt would be around the 27.5%, sir.
Okay, what is the effect of your inhalation anesthetic on shunt?
On inhalation anesthetic agents of more than 1 MAC causes decrease in the hypoxic pulmonary vasoconstriction, increasing the shunt, sir. Less than 1 MAC, all are equipotent isoflurane, sevoflurane, and desflurane, and not have much effect on the HPV, sir.
Okay, so will you prefer to use inhalation anesthetic, or will you prefer to use TIVA if both are available to you?
Sir, for the TIVA, there are things telling that post-operative pulmonary complications like can be high.
Very good, because now with the fiber optic, the incidence of hypoxia during one lung ventilation is less. So especially when you're doing major lung resection, we need to think about acute lung injury after thoracic surgery or one lung ventilation. Okay, so the inhalation anesthetics have a protective effect on acute lung injury. So I will prefer to use a. Okay, so suppose your patient is having desaturation. The saturation has dropped to about 90. So how will you manage?
Yes, sir. If the saturation is slow fall in saturation, first I'd like to check the position of the and keep the 100% oxygen.
Okay.
And first step is then check the position of the DLT and with auscultation. And I'd like to do the suctioning of the both the tracheal and bronchial lumen. And after that, I'd like to see cardiac output is optimal or not. If it is excessive inhalational anesthetic, then I'd like to decrease that and make the cardiac output optimal. And also I would like to see if the excessive blood loss, if the blood has to be replaced. Regarding the ventilation methods, this PEEP, increase the PEEP to the ventilated lung, and or apneic oxygen insufflation to the non-ventilated lung, or adding of the CPAP of 1 to 2 centimeter water to the non-ventilated lung. And even if it does not improve, I would like to do this step by step. Even if it does not improve, then I'd like to consider if there are other agents like NTG or which is causing this decrease in the HPV, yes. Or pulmonary vasodilators also I would like to give, sir, like nitric oxide.
But the thing is, do you have nitric oxide?
No, sir.
Yeah, and then you need a special what do you call machine to give deliver nitric oxide. So you can say that there are certain theoretical things like nitric oxide, IV almetrin, which can be used, but I have not used. But whatever you told is correct. Okay. And the other thing which you missed out is you need to look for IPAP evaluation, especially when you have diseased lung. You should look at the waveforms and make sure that there is no air trapping. Okay, because too much of intrinsic PEEP can shunt the blood away from the ventilated lung to the operated lung. Okay, and in pneumonectomy you can consider early pulmonary artery clamping.
Yes.
Okay, so will you do a volume controlled ventilation or a pressure controlled ventilation?
For this patient, I would like to go with volume control ventilation, sir. Pressure control ventilation is when there is bulla.
Okay, so if you look at evidence, volume control versus pressure control, there is no much difference. Okay, so I will agree with your strategy, but I think somebody has written depending on the airway pressure. So if you are not able to achieve your this one, peak pressure and apply this one, peak pressure, you don't want to have more than 35. So in those cases, sometimes you have a diseased lung, you are struggling to keep the peak pressure less than 35. You can use pressure control. That you most of the time in practical life you are able to manage with a slightly lesser peak pressure than volume control. Okay. So suppose this particular patient is for a pneumonectomy. Nagalakshmi, can I take 10 more minutes? Ranjan?
Sir, carry on. Please carry on. Sir.
Okay, thank you. So if it is for a pneumonectomy, what will be your fluid management?
Fluid management, there will not be any fluid given for the third space loss, sir. And
Okay.
it is 20 ml per kg in the first 24 hours. I'd like to keep, sir, would not exceed 3 liter per in the 24 hours. And urine output, I would not consider more than I will not consider more than 0.5 ml per kg per hour, sir.
So generally, when you have a pneumonectomy, allow them to drink for even 2 hours before surgery, clear fluids 2 hours before surgery. So practically you don't have a fasting deficit also, and you don't have to give third space also. Okay. And if you put you said you are going to put an epidural, no?
Yes,
so sometimes you have epidural will cause hypotension. How will you manage that hypotension?
I would like to correct the hypotension with vasopressors rather than a fluid boluses, and decrease the concentration of the epidural that I'm using.
Okay. Which vasopressor will you choose? Noradrenaline. A small dose of noradrenaline is good enough to abolish the drop in SVR. Okay. So you have put in a okay. What are the other problems when you anticipate if you are doing a pneumonectomy?
There's a chance of acute lung injury, sir. That is post pneumonectomy
pulmonary edema.
Pulmonary edema. And mediastinal shift and cardiac herniation can be expected, and arrhythmias, post-operative arrhythmias.
How will you do you give anything to prevent that post-op arrhythmia?
Sir, post-operative arrhythmias mainly would be the atrial fibrillation that can happen. The choice of drug is diltiazem.
Okay. Sometimes some surgeons give prophylactic digoxin also. Okay. Okay. So I'll just give a couple of complications. So on say a patient you did the surgery, patient was reasonably okay in the post-op. On 6 post-op, this is pneumonectomy. Okay. Yes, 6 post-op day, patient becomes febrile, slowly becoming more dyspneic, coughs, and produces a large amount of sputum. Becomes severely tachypneic and dyspneic. What do you suspect, and how will you proceed?
Stump blowout, which could have caused the bronchopleural fistula. It's one of my differential diagnosis.
Okay.
For this, I would like to secure the airway if it is not secured by placing first ICD placement. So 3 bronchopleural fistula management. 3 things is to avoid the cross contamination, and the next one is to avoid pneumothorax and to avoid
tension pneumothorax can happen if you're not
and to avoid the wastage of the ventilation. So these are the 3 things, sir.
Okay, very good.
My concerns. And for that, I'd like to place an ICD before that will take care of the tension pneumothorax, and followed by that induction and placement of the.
How will you position the patient?
Positioning of the patient is on the this affected side, on the dependent lower side, sir. And then I will do a rapid sequence induction, sir, avoid this contamination.
Okay.
And
so what are the different? Will you put a double lumen tube or a normal tube?
I'd like to place a double lumen tube, sir, to avoid the cross contamination and isolation.
Okay, but you have had already pneumonectomy, no?
But bronchopleural fistula is an absolute indication for the
Double lumen tube.
Yes, sir.
But there are two types of bronchopleural fistula. If it's a trauma bronchopleural fistula, double lumen tube is an absolute indication. When you have a stump dehiscence, sometimes you may have a small stump dehiscence. Okay, so in that case, you need to actually ask the surgeon what exactly is he planning to do. So here, hello, Tanuja, can you hear?
Yes, sir, I can hear, sir.
Okay. So sometimes the surgeons will be very particular that if you put a double lumen tube, whatever is a small stump, because it will be infected stump, and if you pass blindly, you may make it a complete dehiscence. Okay, so what you can ask, if it's a post pneumonectomy, you and this is more common after right-sided pneumonectomy because of the difference in vascular supply. That right side is supplied by single artery. Okay, so what you can do is you can intubate the patient, and under vision you pass the single lumen tube to the left side. Okay, so then that is a safer option. But if it's a trauma causing bronchiectasis, so sorry, it's a bronchopleural fistula, you need to do a this thing. So suppose it's a trauma bronchopleural fistula, post-traumatic bronchopleural fistula. It is bubbling continuously. So what are the precautions you take during transfer? Will you clamp the this
No, sir, I will not clamp the
clamp, but you need to keep it down so that
100 centimeter below
it doesn't contaminate. Okay, and how will you induce a trauma? Patient is quite tachypneic.
I'd like to do a rapid sequence induction, sir.
Will you paralyze?
Keep the patient spontaneous, sir.
So our rapid sequence induction swollen is a and you're answering very well. So what the concern is, if you paralyze and try to do positive pressure ventilation, the air will try to escape through the lung into the pleura and into the suction bottle. Okay, so okay, so you will not put it on suction, but if you are absolutely means you are an experienced thoracic anesthetist, and if you are quite confident with the patient's airway and your intubation or double lumen tube insertion skills, there are people who do a rapid sequence, propofol, fentanyl, scopolamine, intubate with minimum IPPV, and then once you isolate, you start the ventilation. So, but in exam, you should probably think about telling other options also.
Other option is awake fiber optic is another.
Awake fiber optic, and then?
But a placement of the DLT with awake fiber optic will be difficult.
Very difficult. So what you can say is like preservation of spontaneous ventilation is the most important thing. So options are you take the patient deep on spontaneous with inhalational anesthetic, spray the vocal cord, topicalize, and then you can try an double lumen tube. Or you can, as you said, you can do intubate with a rapid sequence intubation also. Okay. Ranjan, shall I stop, Ranjan?
Yeah.
Yeah. Hi, Raj. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. You have anything to show, or you are planning to show some questions or something like that in a Word document? Is something is there, or we can share it later?
Yeah, I will share it later. I will send you the document and I will share it later.
That's good then. I mean,
I will want to just tell Tanuja. Tanuja, you answered very well. You have what do you call as expected. You answered very well.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's true. I mean, thank you so much, Raj. I mean, usually
Uh,
lung cases, if there is bronchiectasis or a COPD, that is considered to be very nightmare for the students. When they get a mitral stenosis or a thyroid or a pregnancy, you can see the change in their face. Okay, I can do well. But this lung case, usually this bronchiectasis, they will scratch their head. Immediately you can know that, okay, they've got lung case. But you made things very easy for most of the students attended that yeah, even lung case can be presented if you know the steps how to do it. uh, Bade sir is there. Bade sir is Nagalakshmi, can you
Yeah,
unmute
yeah.
Bade sir,
Sir is
please?
online. Sir, but sir, you can carry on, sir.
Good evening to all of you. I just
Sir, good
wanted
evening,
to,
sir.
I
Good
just
evening,
wanted
sir.
to appreciate both of them for conducting a very good viva and for the present. They have covered most of the things. It was very nice. Only
Yes, sir.
thing is, some old examiners know may ask some
Yes, sir.
questions like what is the secretion retaining position, what is the secretion draining position, and all that.
Yes, sir.
For
So that
lobectomy,
Tanuja answered. Tanuja
Tanuja
answered
answered
it.
that.
But it was cut, sir. I could not hear.
secretion draining position and secretion
Postal
retaining
drainage.
position. Before good old days, no, they used to do lobectomy and all was single lumen tube.
Yes,
So
sir.
those
Yes.
days, these positions were very important. The secretion draining position used to be called as a Perry-Brown position,
Yes, sir.
and the
Okay.
secretion retaining position was overhauled position. That
Okay.
for that overhauled position, you need a separate table. This is just like some old examiner may ask.
So then
Yes,
we
yes.
will also fail, sir.
This is new to us also, sir.
Aware.
Yeah.
I just wanted them to aware.
Yeah.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Yeah. But
I
very
will
nice
say that
presentation. Very nice presentation.
Tanuja
Yes,
answered
sir.
extremely well.
Yeah,
Very
Yes,
yeah.
good.
No, but the way you conducted also was very nice.
that is true. The way Raj took the case from very basic level to very advanced level was very
Yep.
commendable. You covered everything which is required for a bronchiectasis, not only for exam purpose, even for a practical purpose. Who are doing the case, they will have some idea about how to do it. Wish we had more time. We had discussed more about it with some diagrams and PowerPoints. But unfortunately, we have covered almost 2 hours of the day.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Raj.
Okay.
It was really very educative, and